Good day. I am Madeline T, and I will be presenting the materials flow analysis of Vietnam and Indonesia, alongside with my researchers, Aaron Chan, Martin Jurilla, Mikaela Mansilla, Madeline T, Dr. Anthony Chiu, and Dr. Faith Martinico-Perez. Firstly, we would like to share to you the outline of presentation. Firstly, we will be introducing the countries of Indonesia and Vietnam. Just to give a brief background of the study. We will next be sharing the methodology and the steps performed in the study, the results and discussion in the form of graphs and analysis of decoupling and ratios, and lastly, the conclusion as the summary of findings and recommendations for future study. Now, to introduce the countries, we would like to first share to you the context of the situation right now. Due to the increased pace of industrialization, there's an increased use of materials. There is a need to understand the extraction of materials and its disposal, which is why we have decided to select the tool of material flow analysis, or MFA, as a method to analyze the resource utilization and its effect on the economy and environment. With this, we will be introducing the two main countries of our study, Vietnam and Indonesia. Now, these are developing countries are less studied. In the Asia-Pacific region, it illustrates the highest growth in material use. Firstly, let us look into Vietnam. Vietnam's food processing contributes to 40% of export and known for mineral and rare metal deposits. As for Indonesia, they are known for their fruits and vegetables, coconut, rubber, and automobiles. Both of them are rich in minerals, and metal sources, and agriculture. Given this, there are also current studies who tackled on the MFA and their current resources. For Vietnam, there are two studies as shown on screen, where the first studied on the import and export and environmental issues and laws, while the second study performed MFA on the electronic sector. While for Indonesia, it used MFA to analyze how to mitigate waste generation. So nextly, we will be sharing to you the methodology. There are three main steps. Firstly is the material flow analysis, which is the tool being selected for this. Now, the data is taken from the United Nations Environment Program and the World Bank with these 5 bulleted items. Next, we will be having the MFA computations. They are computed for these 3 bulleted items. Nextly, for the analysis of data, we would like to show the implication of the computations and graphs developed. I will be passing the floor to Aaron for the next portions.
The DMC per GDP ratio illustrates the efficiency of resource use in an economy. The lower the ratio is, it means that the economy is more efficient in their resource utilization. As can be seen in the line chart, there is a sudden spike in Vietnam from 1988 to 1999. This is mainly due to the political unrests that Vietnam has undergone. For instance, the Battle of Spratly Islands, the collapse of communist power in Europe, and the dissolution of Soviet Union all directly and indirectly influenced the economic performance of Vietnam. However, as the Vietnam experienced economic reform, the efficiency of material use gradually increased. While both Vietnam and Indonesia were affected by the 1997 to 1998 Asian financial crisis, it was evident that the impact was more visible in Indonesia, where it was mentioned that IMF had assisted Indonesia to get their economy back on track. As both countries invest more in non-metallic minerals, more infrastructure development projects were done. As a result, both countries saw an improvement in their resource use efficiency. We also looked into the total amount of materials needed to satisfy the final demands of an economy. As can be seen in the line chart, there is a general growing trend for both countries. This means that the resource consumption per capita for the final demands of the country increases per year. As can be observed, the MF per capita of Vietnam overtook Indonesia's in the year 2000. This also means that Indonesia uses less materials to satisfy its demand, even though it generates a higher GDP. Further analysis shows that both countries has lowered its consumption of biomass and increased the use of non-metallic minerals. This can actually be attributed to their investment in their infrastructure development projects. We also examined whether the countries in consideration have achieved decoupling through the study of horizon. The GDP versus DMI illustrates the comparison of economic growth and resource input. As can be seen here, Vietnam has actually achieved relative decoupling in 2013, while Indonesia has achieved it 5 years earlier than Vietnam. Another part of decoupling to take note is the decrease of its environmental deterioration. Hence, we also looked into the comparison of GDP with DPO. Essentially, this illustrates the economic growth in comparison to the waste released to the environment. As observed, Vietnam was able to minimize its economic pressures in 2007, while Indonesia has achieved it 6 years earlier. This shows that both countries have achieved relative decoupling. However, one thing to note is that in Indonesia, there were emission data gaps for the years prior to 2000. So further studies can also look into it.
Now let us discuss the carbon emissions versus the GDP decoupling. In the current trend, we can see that for the GDP and CO2 emissions for Vietnam, it has achieved relative decoupling in 1995. As for Indonesia, it achieved relative decoupling in 2002. They have similar trends but different relative decoupling occurrences. With the current trend, however, the index growth may still remain decoupled in the following years if the government continues to provide policies that they utilize their raw materials more sustainably and on carbon emission reduction. However, if we focus on Indonesia, they still focus tremendous pressure and trouble regarding its carbon emissions despite being a member of the Kyoto Protocol, as stated by Murdiyaso 2004. Now, for the next part, we will be discussing the IPAT, or the drivers of the DMC. For both countries, it can be seen that the affluence, population, technology follow the same thread. And the dominant drivers include the population in the first period. However, it shifted to the affluence for the latter two periods. This can be noted that the actual consumption is primarily driven by economic development activities for both countries. Given this, we will be discussing the conclusion. Now, both countries have GDP growth as stable, but they must be open to improve sustainable future. For Vietnam, they have increased waste due to the urbanization. As a recommendation, they must have capacity building for sanitary landfills and practice the 3 Rs. Now for Indonesia, they lack sustainability or practices. That is why, as a recommendation, they must have agricultural safety practices and sustainable technology and have various agreements on this sector. With this, we would like to thank you for our presentation, and here are our references.